Paul, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, man. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on board, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's good, man. We were just kind of chatting beforehand, and I said it's very interesting. I always find it very interesting whenever I get an opportunity to speak to someone that is very, very similar in terms of age range to myself, because I think it's very easy to just kind of see the direct correlation with the timelines and how everything's gone. So I'm really interested because obviously you're very, very young still, especially in regards to the game now. We see longer and longer the lifespans of these athletes just increasing. You've got guys like Mike Felix that are up in there now, obviously doing incredible things far later onto their life than kind of what we're used to seeing with kind of quite how brutal the sport can be sometimes, man. So I'm very interested to kind of get into your kind of progression through the years and kind of where you're going with bits and pieces, because it's been fascinating to watch you, man. Obviously, you're not the biggest competitor out there. You're not the tallest competitor. You're not carrying the most weight. And for me, I find that absolutely fascinating, man. As someone that's 6'8" and basically walking around at 135 kilos naturally, it's like it blows my brain wide open to watch guys like you just come in and just destroy people that have 50%, 25% body weight on top of you. It's absolutely amazing, man. So let's go back to kind of the start and kind of your introduction into training. I understand you did a bit of weight training when you're kind of like 18, 19. You got into rugby around about the same sort of time. So how did you find all of that progressing from just getting into the gym to then actually moving into a strongman environment, and then a really competitive strongman environment really quite quickly?
Yeah, so my introduction to weights, I was boxing when I was like 13, 14, and we'd do a really little kind of odd bit of lifting, but I was always into like strength training, doing push-ups, pull-ups, all that kind of stuff. Then once I started boxing, I kind of had a few months where I was doing sports, but I didn't really have a sport to focus on.
Yeah.
And then I got a weight set, as you do, Argos weights at home.
Yes.
And then kind of got hooked on that. I think I had two dumbbells up to 20 kilos. So, the first big goal was like being able to curl them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's not bench press. It's not pull. It's not anything that's like relative. It's like, can I bicep curl these? Okay, now I'm strong.
I remember really, really gutted because I don't know what ratio I'd come up with in my head, but I thought I'll be able to kill these really easy, and I couldn't at all. So I dropped down to like 10 kilos, and my ego, 14, a big hit, isn't it? So I kind of worked my way through them, managed to kill the 20s eventually. Then from there, got a barbell, got some more weights, got kicked out into the garden. So I didn't before, as you do. And then when I was 15, I've been lifting about a year at home. I started going to the gym with a mate of mine from school, and then that's when it really kicked in, because obviously I had all the kit. Then I had a lot of equipment access to. I had people there that roughly knew what they were doing. So I started training from there, and then started really like tracking everything, seeing my list progress. Started writing programs. They weren't great, but just getting my mind around the new new hobby. And I just really, really enjoy like the nerdy progression side of it each week. Do 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps, etc. Training there for about a year and progressing really quickly as you do at that age. And then I saw a guy wearing an INSA shirt, and back then it was everyone's doing bodybuilding. I saw a guy in an INSA shirt. I was like, he must be strong. He was deadlifting, I think he was doing 220 for a few, and I was like, what? Like, my mind exploded, because in that gym, a 200 deadlift was a rare thing. So I was talking to him. Well, I say talking to him. I was a very, very shy, quiet 15-year-old lad. I wasn't talking very much.
Yeah.
He basically said I was really strong for my age, which I knew I was strong, but I didn't have much of an idea of how to quantify it, because I knew I was quite strong compared to most of the guys at gym, but competitive wise, I didn't really have much of a clue. So he asked me if I'd ever tried any strongman training, because at the time I was doing like a powerlifting, bodybuilding type mix, just trying to get big and strong.
Yeah.
And I said no, I hadn't tried anything, but I'd always watched strongman on TV. But outside of Worlds and Britain's, I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know there was any kind of, grassroots level at all. So
Yeah.
basically started training with him. We started rigging stuff up like it was a bodybuilding gym, so we didn't have a load of kit, but we were doing like farmers with the heavy dumbbells, rigging up a dumbbell out like a weight string, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so people watching this, when they have a fully kitted out strongman gym all inside, it's not how it was.
Nah.
Even when I started, it was a rare thing to find a log or farmers, anything like that. And then a few months went by, and basically he knew a guy running a comp. So in Sheffield at the time, it was just over the way in Stocksbridge. He asked me if I wanted to compete, and I had about 2 weeks' notice. I said I'll try it.
Yes.
Thankfully, a gym had just opened down the road, and it had a log. I think it had a log, a stone, and a pair of farmers. So I had like quick event session, and then jumped in. Did my first comp. Got my arse handed to me, as you do, in the first one. But,
So were you going in a novice competition? Because it's like now we've got like, you've kind of got like beginner competitions and then novice competitions, which is kind of like that. Because when I first started, it was just novice. You know what I mean? There was nothing before that, and now we've kind of got like the prerequisite beforehand. So what were you going straight into to a novice, to an inter, to an open comp? Was it weight?
So back then it was kind of, well, at the time I didn't know anything about it, but it was kind of novice, opens, inters weren't really a thing yet.
Okay.
So I forgot what the name was. They didn't have a class. It was just one. It was just one category in the comp, but it would have been. It was like a novice weight.
Okay. Cool.
But they were, because back then there weren't many comps, so there were some pretty strong guys in compared to what you'd normally find in a novice now. So I came second to last in that. Phil Roberts won. That he still reminds me about now. Even though he had 10 years on me. But yeah, I just loved it. Loved the competition, loved the experience. And then from there, kind of just started gearing myself more towards strongman training and finding more kit and entering more comps.
Sick, man, sick. Now I'm interested because I think a lot of people can kind of attest to that same thing where, you know, they don't necessarily have access to lots of strongman kit. I mean, I know that when I first started training strongman, I had access to absolutely nothing apart from traveling the best part of an hour and a half from where I live just outside of Brighton to go down to Havant to go and train with Rob Frampton. So it was like, okay, basically everything that I did in the gym, it was some crazy makeshift version of a strongman. Like the amount of times that, you know, people have come into the gym and they're like, where's all the kit? And I'm there in a power rack with this makeshift Viking press with 2 barbells hanging up. And you're like, okay, that's a strongman. You can walk into any gym and you're like, okay, that guy probably trains strongman. You know, because it's got half of the gym on one contraption trying to do something. And you're like, good job. So for you, like, how was that? Because, you know, I think strongman is a sport where you can get relatively so far with just doing quite a lot of gym-based lifts. And I know I've heard you speak on this before where, you know, strongman is traditionally a sport where it's like, I'm strong in the gym, I'm going to try out strongman. And it's like, well, it does, you know, there isn't a complete carryover. There needs to be some form and basis of athleticism, etc. But I'm interested to kind of see from your standpoint. Obviously, you've got a lot further along in the game. How far do you think you can kind of get with doing that, and kind of how often do you think, especially people that are new to the sport, how often do you feel like they should be getting on implements? Like, do you think it is a benefit to start off training from implements from the beginning, or do you think it is a benefit to kind of create that traditional gym base and then start to kind of bring the progressions of, you know, moving from just a traditional barbell clean and jerk into more of a strongman clean, into a push press, etc., etc.?
Yeah, so I think the big thing, the big factor is your background. So I was just thinking about this earlier, coaching. Well, I was programming earlier, and I've got new guys, and they've got access to everything. It's really nice to just, you know, if I want them to do yoke 3 times a week, they can. Rather than when we started, you might get an event session at the weekend, but even that was a luxury. So if you have someone that someone that started out, like, for example, I've had quite a few guys that do athletics, sprinters, that come to try strongman. They pick things up really well, especially carries, like it's just there. So for guys like that, it wouldn't be as important to get as much working on the implements. It's more about building a base of strength they've got that athletic base there. So although obviously you would have them on the implements, they wouldn't need quite as much practice and time to learn, because the learning curve has been massively reduced just from the sporting background. If you have a guy, say, that's done a bit of bodybuilding and he's fairly strong in the gym, but he's quite stiff, he's not very mobile, then you wouldn't be worried so much about the strength level. You just want to get him on the kit, light loads, lots of volume, lots of technique work, and just get him moving. Because the big thing is when you have really strong guys that haven't used the kit, lots of injury risk. If you get someone who's athletic, you can make them stronger. They look much less likely to get hurt. So it's all about, it's horses for courses. It's seeing who you've got and what they're going to need to progress the most. And it can vary massively depending on what people's backgrounds are.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the fact that you kind of brought up that, you know, for the bigger, just strong gym-based guys, working with light load. Man, that is fucking refreshing to actually hear from another coach getting those guys working with light load, because I think so many people see this sport, they see the absurd numbers that are being pushed out, and it's like, right, I just need to be working on like these 1RMs all of the time. And it's like, it's so painful as a coach, you know, when you can see that you have the potential for someone, you know, to go really far, but because that, you know, it is all over Instagram, it's all about the social clout, it's all about this, how many numbers are you lifting, and you just get caught up into like that combine harvester of competitiveness. And actually, for a lot of athletes, it takes so much away from their actual training progression, from them actually, you know, breaking new personal best grounds and actually going somewhere with their training. So for you, like what kind of loads and stuff, like volume work wise, would you like to work with someone like that?
So it's all depend on skill. So say let's keep it simple. Squats and deadlifts, we'll push them hard.
Yeah.
You know, like a traditional strength progression. Something like a log or an axle. At first, I like to do a lot of work, like 60, 70%, and just getting lots of volume and lots of work in. Moving events, sometimes even less. One big thing I like to do with guys that have a decent strength base that don't have that athletic base, a lot of single leg work, really light. More recently, I've started making the assistants work for guys that are even lighter. So we'll have bodyweight walking lunges, you know, step ups, and just things that are getting them moving on planes of motion they're not used to. So even though without any strength being built at all, it's just kind of a proprioception and skill thing. So, you know, save the strength progressions for the main lifts, and then just use it as a skill and technique exercise on the other movements. I like to slowly build up moving events, but try and keep a nice level of speed going. I don't want to be grinding for any yokes or farmers at first. And then using, like, you know, if you've got a loading medley, I like to do a lot like sandbag keg EMOMs. So they're getting a lot of work in on movements that are a little less skill based, but they're not going too heavy. They're using that as a conditioning element to build up the work capacity, obviously.
Yeah, and it's such functional positions, you know what I mean, especially with like sandbag kegs and whatever. For anyone in any sport, you're going to get so bloody functionally fit from just picking up and carrying those implements. Like the amount of trunk strength and coordination you build just from doing that on a weekly basis. I think for a lot of sports, actually, that is pretty helpful. You know, I see more and more now, because I'm from a very, very heavy rugby background. I'm seeing more and more now this kind of almost like strongman hybrid training for rugby. And it's like, well, yeah, because, you know, you're not in these like traditional positions as much. You've got this pulling, you've got this pushing, you need to have stability, you need to have the ability to perform repeated bouts of really high intense work with very, very minimal rest times. So I think that sort of stuff, you know, although it's perfect for strongman, I think people are starting to see that actually there might be benefits in other areas and other sports now with this sort of training style.
Yeah, definitely. I've been seeing a few clips of the England rugby union team doing various kind of strongman type bits and just kind of odd strength, like real world stuff. And it is a really useful thing for kind of like non-strength sport athletes. The good thing with carries is easy to get into, especially if you've got a decent athlete. They can pick them up straight away, fairly low injury risk usually, and can give them a decent strength workout and a massive conditioning workout all in one go. Especially in a team, you can get everyone in working hard without too many coaching cues, too much injury risk. So it's great. It's really good carryover, especially for something like rugby where you've got a big squad. You know, it might have 10, 20 guys. You get into a session. So
Yeah.
sandbag carry or keg carry, it's just easy, low hanging fruit, and you can get into it, work hard, nice and easily.
Yeah, perfect. And like you said there, you know, if you're working with a good sized group of people, it's so easy to just bring someone else in, bring someone else in, bring someone else, circulate these exercises, and kind of create something that you can do pretty much anywhere. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the other thing. It's so versatile. You don't just have to be in the gym. You can do it anywhere. It's really easy for these guys to have it down at training grounds and bits and pieces too. So I think it's very, very exciting that we're starting to see the potential of strongman kind of come across into a few of these other areas now. But kind of staying on track with that, you know, I think it's very interesting, and I absolutely love the fact that I've kind of hear you talk on the fact that you do think it's so important, especially for people coming into strongman, that they do have some kind of like foundational athleticism that they can use and build off of. So for people, you know, that are maybe new to the sport, maybe the slightly bigger guys, or maybe, you know, for someone like yourself, you know, we often see the slightly smaller athletes that aren't carrying quite as much weight. They have to rely on that athleticism in the competitions, because you can't really rely on that mass moves mass kind of old school approach that we've seen that's kind of taken strongman for so many years now. So for you and for anyone that you know that might be listening that's in a very similar position to yourself, what would you say are those kind of like key foundational elements that people should really be looking to build up, whether that be in the gym or with their strongman training, that you think is kind of really important? Have you got anything kind of like top 3, top 5 things that you think are really, really important for that long-term athletic progression?
Yeah, so I'd say single leg work's the biggest one for me. Getting used to being on one leg and expressing strength on that one leg. So obviously yokes, farmers, sled drag, everything, it's single leg work. So having that in your program and being comfortable when you haven't got both feet on the ground or you're not in a perfectly balanced position, that's a massive one. Second one I'd say is triple extension. So triple extension, what you hit if you're jumping or you're throwing, or but even on a push press, a clean, it's you know, a lot of big strong guys, they like to be flat footed, and that's fine for some events, but some events you need that triple extension, you need the power to be able to express your strength. So getting things like jumps and throws in, and just things where you're exploding off your heels and onto your toes and getting that full extension all the way up through your body is a key one. Other than that, I'd say rotation is a good one. Being able to, you know, it sounds basic, but just being able to twist and being comfortable twisting rather than being on sagittal plane with lifting. So a lot of times strongman, you've got a stone or a sandbag and it takes you kind of away from center of mass.
Yeah.
And that's when you get a lot of injuries, lower backs, obliques, things, abs are going. So just being able to be in kind of less, in the more compromised positions and be okay and be confident. Like I know I've got in some spots where I'm not in a great position biomechanically, but I know I'm robust enough that I'm not worrying about being injured. I can still work hard. Whereas you see some guys who might have a stone, you know, slightly off somewhere, and they're terrified their bicep or their lat's about to go. And you're not going to lift anything if you're worried about being injured. So it's all about, you know, that stuff is just building up some resilience to bad positions and being confident in those positions that you can still apply a lot of power and strength and not have to stress about something pinging off.
Yeah, mate, I think you hit the nail on the head so well there in terms of, you know, actually being resistant to those bad positions, because I think we can all kind of agree that when you're in the gym and the conditions are perfect. You have a lovely level flat floor. You've got a perfect platform to lift to. You're not worrying about any other external factors. It's very easy to just go through the sequencing of a movement, to hit every position perfectly and to load it. But for anyone that's actually competed, we know that those aren't the conditions that you compete in. You know, the ground is uneven, the platforms aren't always perfect. You know, there's winds, there's crowds, there's noise, there's distractions, there's other stimuli that are completely taking you away. And when you get into the competition, you don't have the luxury of just being able to bumble the fuck about and take your time with this stuff, because you're competing against some of the strongest people in the world. Well, especially you are. So it's like you don't even have a second to doubt yourself. And I think that's quite clearly seen in quite a lot of the competitions, where you see guys that just crush the first 3 stones, 4 stones, and they get to that last one and there's just that little bit of doubt, and those last few seconds tick by, and all of a sudden, rather than being second on the stones, you're now 7th and you're out of the podium position. And at the top, it really is that close. So, like, I mean, I know you could probably talk on it, like, when you come to these competitions, you can't have any doubt. You've just got to smash it, rag that weight about, get it done, and just make sure that you can kind of achieve the best form possible. But we all know that in the middle of competition, necessarily, you're not going to hit, you know, perfect form every single time. But sometimes you do just kind of have to rag it up a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. It's all about being on, like, competing under fire, isn't it? Like, you know, something like powerlifting or weightlifting, it's a really close skill. You've probably got the same bar, same plates, same nice platform. Strongman is such an open skill. Like you say, you could have a yoke in a gym that's perfectly balanced, perfect straight run, and then the competition floor's gravel, or there's holes in it, or you're doing a log with 1 tire and 1 pad on it, and it just throws you off. But like you say, you've just got to get on with it and be confident in your ability that you can. As soon as you start doubting yourself or worrying about, you know, oh, well, this is uneven, this isn't right, this isn't the same. You see it all the time, guys are like, oh, well, this floor's terrible, it's slippy. And it's like, well, you can either pull out or you can get on with it. And the injury risk is higher. But I've never gone into a comp worried about an injury risk, because if you're worrying about an injury risk, you might as well pull out. And if you get injured, you get injured. There's no way, like, you see it all the time, people complain about this and this, or this is bad and this, or it's raining, it's too dangerous. It's like, well, it's so actually tire flip recently, guys going about, oh, I like my biceps. Well, don't do strongman.
Yeah.
Get your biceps ready for it, and what will be will be. But if you're saying, oh, well, I can't do that event because this organizer's done this, it's made it dangerous, you're in the wrong sport. So you need to prepare yourself, and just be ready to get on with it on the day. As bad as it is, it's going to be the same for everyone. So if you're prepared well, you'll probably be all right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And, you know, I think I'm sure I've heard you speak about this before, where, you know, we live in this day and age now where we're seeing more and more kind of specialists creep out of the woodwork in particular areas. You know, they're entering competitions because they know they're going to pull a load of points from their static pressing or their static pulling or their mobile events or whatever it might be, but they're not able to, you know, perform in those top 3 to 5 positions in every single event. So they come across to something that they're really not strong on, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, well, we've now got this whole list of excuses, and it's like, well, you know what, mate, if you want a deadlift, go and be a fucking deadlifter in powerlifting competitions, like, because we do everything here, and if you don't want to do everything, then strongman is not the sport for you, man. It is not. Yeah, I completely agree with that. yeah, you see it so much. I mean, I'm obviously, you're probably not part of quite as many of the groups and events and whatever, but, you know, I think back to the novice and into competitions and being in those Facebook groups, and you've got people like, you know, the car deadlift, what height are the car deadlift handles? They want to know, like, the precise centimeters, the fucking diameter, has it got knurling on it? Yeah. Is it powder coated? Is it not? And you're like, guys, why are you asking this like it has a direct correlation? It's like, if this is a powdered log, then my max is actually 127.5, but without a powder coating, it's 132. And you're like, no, just go and pick the fucking thing up, man. What is wrong with you? Yeah, oh, man, yeah, that takes me back.
A little tip actually for anyone competing. If you see or hear someone start talking about how a kit's unsafe or something's wrong or something's different or bad, really play on it with them. Like really, really get it into their heads. Really play along. Could easily throw them off. You see it a lot. So yeah, really get them in like, oh, this is terrible. Oh, we should pull out. We shouldn't compete, and then leave them to it, and they'll just fester. It's a good little tactic.
I love that, man. Yeah, the mind games, 100%. Now, you know, coming into kind of more of your professional career, you know, I think it's quite amazing. You basically went from juniors basically getting an invite the following year to Worlds, isn't that right? From 17 to 18.
Yeah, so I did. Yeah, well, we were really lucky to have the Junior Worlds in 2016 and 2017 in Canada. Two amazing comps. Came second in 2016, so it was like my mission to win in 2017. Got the win, and then from Britain's end the next year, I got the reserve spot World's Strongest Man the following April-May time.
So even at juniors, if you win at juniors or come kind of top three, that's kind of it. The junior isn't a direct feeder into the open in terms of, like, I know obviously if you win World's Strongest Man one year, you automatically qualify for the next year. There's no direct feeder system from the juniors into the seniors.
No, so
That's interesting.
I'm not exactly sure how it's working at the moment, but basically it always ran parallel to each other. So we'd have the England juniors, UK's juniors, World juniors.
Seems stupid.
But now I know now the UK's junior winner will get through to UK Strongest Man and Seniors, which is great.
Sick.
So that's a good way for people to get onto the big shows. The thing is, when we were doing juniors, we were always doing the opens anyway, because there were only 2 or 3 junior comps a year. So we'd always be doing open comps. Like my first junior comp was probably like my 8th comp when it became so the England's juniors, but then probably the 6 of the comps that year. So it was always, you know, we'd do the senior comps, and then when the juniors popped up, we would take the opportunity, but it was never the sole focus. See a lot of young lads now, they focus on the juniors, which is fine as a main goal, but I see them not doing open comps because they're against older guys, and it's silly. It's not a good way to push yourself on, especially if you're one of the stronger juniors, because you're going up to comps being one of the best guys. And the only time that's really fine is if you're World's Strongest Man, because there's no one else. But if you're the second best junior in Britain, but you'd come 32nd out of the seniors in the opens, you know, there's comps you can be doing that'll push you on more to go along with that. So I'd always say for young guys going in, enter more comps, go into senior comps, go into heavier comps. Even if you are in the junior range, don't just focus on only that, because you'll be holding yourself back a little bit. And when you do get into the opens, once you're too old, you know, it could be a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah, that's perfect, and transitions almost perfectly onto kind of what I wanted to go on to next, which is, I find it's very interesting, obviously, being able to do this. I get to speak to a lot of different athletes, and kind of every athlete, I feel like they kind of have this sweet spot with how many times they want to compete a year, like ideally, and then how many times they are kind of having to compete a year. So kind of, well, 2 things really. Firstly, do you perceive the kind of the life and career of a strongman becomes that much easier when you start to break into the upper echelons, because you aren't necessarily having to qualify for all of these big competitions to be seen, to be heard, to break onto the radar, and instead with a little bit more, you know, of a bigger social media following, or, you know, just good brand awareness, they might start being invited directly to these competitions anyway. So do you think that is kind of it makes being a professional strongman easier than becoming a professional strongman, if you will?
Yeah, definitely. There is that nice spot when you can kind of reduce your calendar a little bit. So I had a bit of an annoying one recently with the UKs. I had to do the Northern qualifying. Well, when the first lockdown was 2020, and then England's, and then UK's, which should have got me straight through the next year, but because of basically the calendar switching round, and then I had to do Northern qualifier again before I did UK. So it was just like another comp that's pretty heavy against some pretty strong lads that you need to be fairly on the ball for. That's taking away time from prepping for the others. So it is good when you can kind of focus only on the big comps, and you can just focus down so much more. Say you've got 5 big comps rather than having to do 7, 8, and then you're spreading yourself a little bit thinner. So yeah, it is nice when you have to cut down on the qualifying comps and you can just focus on the big shows.
So for you, what are you looking for in terms of that sweet spot for yourself for competing a year? Do you have kind of like a number that you know feels really good? And I know quite a few people kind of found that they were quite aware that during COVID, where they couldn't compete, their body was actually quite thankful that they couldn't do it, and they've kind of a lot of the, I feel like a lot more of the pros aren't competing, you know, almost every weekend like they used to, and now it's kind of, we're only seeing them at kind of two or three of these big shows per year because they actually want to put out a really fucking good performance in those shows. So for you, what is that sweet spot, and what kind of do you have to do just because of where you are in your career right now?
Yeah, so I like doing like 5 or 6 comps a year.
Okay.
If it depends, because something like UK's, which is 3 days, is a brutal one. It takes a lot out
Yeah,
of you.
man.
If it's a single day comp, even if it's really too bad, a few days later you're okay back training. So I like for what I've got. I've got Britain's, UK's, England's planned in. Hopefully, can you still hear me there?
Yeah. All good.
All right. Hopefully, Worlds, depending on how Britain's goes. But yeah, that's kind of you get a good season in. Obviously, more opportunities, but you're not quite overdoing it. If some guys push 10, 15, and if they're light enough shows, it's not too bad. But nowadays, there's not too many light shows. So if you're constantly doing shows that are 350 deadlifts, 160 overheads, it can get quite a lot to train for. Like I think Loz mentioned the other day, if you've got a comp that's 120 log for reps and 120 farmers, you can do that as an event session and train the next day. But when you're starting to get to the really heavy comps, you've got to be a little bit more selective. But 5 to 6 for me is a nice sweet spot.
Yeah, I'd say that's absolutely perfect. I mean, I'll never forget. Obviously I had Loz on the show before, and I've spoken to him on many occasions. But we always laugh about how when Alexei Novikov first came on the scene, and you'd look at his social media, and the guy's competing the best part of like 30 times in a year, and you're going, what the fuck, dude? How on earth are you flying all over the country, all over the world, competing against these absolute monsters, and then coming onto the world stage and trying to put on a good show there? And I think he was an athlete that we really saw highlighted. Okay, when he actually isn't competing 30 times a year and only gets kind of like 5 to 6 competitions, like you're kind of saying with that sweet spot, just how much better those big shows go for him. And it's like, I think more and more of the athletes now are actually turning on to the importance of being an athlete, treating your body like you are an athlete, and actually thinking about the damage that you're doing whilst you're competing. Yes, it might just be our sport, and yes, that ache and pain and whatever is just kind of part of the parcel, but also thinking about how that directly correlates and impacts your performance and what you can actually, produce on the stage. Because like we said before, it doesn't matter how fucking strong you are in the gym. If you can't express that on the stage, you're not going to get to the podium. And if you're not going to get to the podium, you're not going to make those progressions, and you're not going to do yourself, you're not going to give yourself justice. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. So I always say, like, you only need to be strong on comp day. It's great hitting PBs in the gym, and it's great hitting big lifts, and we all love to do it. And if you had a comp prep where you didn't hit a PB, you wouldn't be very happy. But if at the end you knew you're going to win the comp, you'd take it. So it's always a case of, I need to put in the work now that's going to get me to be the best on the day. Now, that's probably going to involve getting a few PBs, but they shouldn't necessarily be the focus all the time. It should just be what steps I'm going to take to get to be the best at this comp. I've had it myself when I've competed really regularly, and I've overdone the gym work in between, and then I found that the recovery is not there for comps. So especially if you've got a lot of comps in a short space of time, if you've got an 8-week prep, it's fine. You can hit some big lifts in gym. If you've got 4 comps coming up in 6 weeks, you kind of want to save it for the day. So the work in between should be just getting you ready for those days. You shouldn't have too many massive efforts. It should be, comp day, comp day, comp day. That's when you're going to really put it out there.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with that, and that kind of whole notion of the, if you can just kind of accept the fact that you don't have to hit a PB during your training, as long as you can express that all out there, and get rep PBs and place in the top 3 for every single event, then actually realistically, does it matter that you haven't hit a PB in the gym? No, it doesn't really. That is just the ego talking. And yes, to an extent, as a coach, you do have to you have to manage and manipulate that ego of all of the athletes, because there are ones out there, so you have to cradle and nurse those where you can. But I'm interested to kind of get more into the kind of progression, like when you come away from a competition, and obviously you've had some fucking brilliant performances over the last few years where you've been able to compete. At your level, the differences are so minuscule. So how do you personally, or do you reflect on your previous performances? Do you go back? Do you look at video? Do you look and break down and see, okay, I'm not quite happy with my positioning here? How would you take those negatives that you can find, and then implement that into a structure to kind of make sure that doesn't happen for the next competition? Do you like to then reverse engineer it, work those numbers into your training program and say, okay, well, I didn't hit this at this point, so I know that I need to add X amount of weight on in X time frame, which is X per week or per month or whatever it might be? How do you like to kind of reflect on prior performances, kind of, and look to move forward with it?
Yeah, so for me, I'll set them like priority levels. So last year's Brits, for example, I made a big mistake on the yoke on one of the events. It cost me a lot of points. But my yoke is a good event, and I hadn't messed up really a set old training block. So it's one of those things where, yes, I can do more work to make it more consistent, but I think it was one of those things where sometimes it just happens. So,
yeah, man.
I haven't chucked a lot of yoke working because I think it was just a bit of a freak thing that I'll work on more going forward, but it's not a massive priority. My deadlift, for me, was my weakest event. I was joint last on that.
Come up amazingly, man, in the last few years. Like, fuck me, how good has that come on?
So, well, that was a big focus. I thought, so I've always pulled raw. I got myself in a suit, and so I hit 325 for 4 for my top set last year in the build-up, and the program went pretty well. I hit quite a few rep PBs. I got 3 reps of 350 on the day, and that's which was a PB. Unfortunately, it's just not enough of a PB to to beat the top guy. So it was all going the right way. So got the suit on. I've rewrote the block. I've used a pretty similar block. But I've increased my frequency, and my plan was to hit 342 for 4, which would be 17 kilos increase on my 4 rep max from the last prep. Thankfully, I've hit 345, so I've hit a 20 kilo increase. So that was kind of but if I can get into the 340s, then I'm going to be into the mid pack of deadlifters. If I can push a little bit more beyond that, I should start getting, being at mid table, maybe a little bit higher. So that's been a really successful block, and that's been my main focus from the last show. Everything else been progressing steadily, but it's been, if you can get this deadlift up, because that's my big weakness. Overall, I'm not going to have many bad results. So
yeah,
I've done really well. And it depends. You might have 2 or 3 weaknesses that are slight weaknesses. For me, it's always been like deadlift's been quite glaring. The other things are fairly even across the board. I've got stronger events, but nothing's really below par except for that one. So that's been the massive focus. And well, so far it's paid off. Hopefully it pays off at the weekend.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's just been like how I rank what needs to be worked on, and then give it more attention accordingly.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you kind of spoke on that very, very well there, that it doesn't always necessarily in your training have to be a case of that you need to push everything up. But when you look and reflect and say, okay, it's this, one or maybe two events that I'm hemorrhaging a shitload of points from. If I actually really double down and work hard on these events, then it means that I'm not going to be in 10th position. I'm going to be in 5th position. And if I can maintain being in top 5 position for the entire competition, well, fuck me, Bish did it with Britain's, 20, was it 2018? 20, yeah, COVID's completely messed up. Yeah, I have no idea. But didn't win a single event. Didn't win a single event throughout the entire competition and comes away with the win. And, I think that was a real big wake-up call to a lot of people that were quite new to the sport. It was like, oh, hey, I don't have to be the best at everything. I just have to maintain that top 3, top 4, top 5 position in every single competition. And like you said there, if you can kind of pull yourself up from the kind of like mid to bottom of the table into that mid pack, dude, that's going to do absolute wonders for your points overall. Do you know what I mean? And it's like thinking intelligently about strongman. I think we're seeing more and more of this where it's like, okay, I don't have to try and fix all of this shit. I just need to tweak a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And overall, then that's going to bring everything up.
Yeah, of course. Because you might have an event, say you come third on an event, right? I've got 10 points. I can work really, 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 really hard for 6 months and get 11 points. If you've got an event where you got 1.5, like I did on deadlift, if we get to 5, it's massive. If we get to 6, it's huge gains. So you've got to kind of pick your battles. Obviously, so many events. It's not like we've got free list. We've got so many events to focus on. So if you can find the ones that are really low down, bring them up a high percentage, you're going to get so many more points on the board rather than trying to push your strengths a little bit further.
Yeah. Now, I think it would be rude not to talk about it because it feels like the elephant in the room. But obviously, we are now a few days out from a very, very big competition. Just kind of a little bit, how are you feeling yourself? How are you feeling approaching the competition? Is there anyone particularly that you are kind of looking out for in certain events? Are there any kind of benchmarks that you've set yourself kind of coming into these events, kind of numbers and ranges that you'd like to hit? Obviously, don't feel like you have to tell me, but if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to hear some of that.
Yeah, so obviously Britain's on Saturday. I'm looking forward to the comp. It's been nice to have Britain's last October and then have an off season and build towards Britain's again. Normally it's a year apart, so you have all the other competitions in between, but this one's been quite specific. I can a little off season and then prep again and see where the improvements are quite quickly. A lot of good guys to watch out for. Obviously, got a massive field. I think for me, Tom's probably the favourite with these events and how on form he is. I think Paro Dwyer is looking really strong on this set of events. I think he's quite underrated and he's probably my kind of second favourite for this one. Goals for me are, first of all, not making mistakes. Last year I made a big mistake in the yoke and that cost me quite a lot. So I'm hoping for a clean run. If we can get a clean run, it'll be a pretty good run. And then getting to the top half on deadlift. If we can do that, that'll be a massive step up. And if we can do that with the points it gets me, if I don't make any mistakes, it should mean I've got a pretty decent run across the board, and therefore I get quite a lot of points and quite high up there. So that's a big one for me. If I can not make any mistakes, get top half on the deadlift, then I'm going to be in a really good spot.
Superb. Yeah, man, I'd have to completely agree with you. And, kind of looking over, for those people that are listening that might not know the competition events, you've got 200 shield carry, 200 kilo shield carry, 360 axle deadlift for reps, 130 axle floor to overhead for reps. You've got the ascending sandbags over bar, and then finish off with the castle stones. So I think, the one that we might see a little bit of contention through with is maybe the sandbag. That's not an event, I feel like we often see much in those bigger shows. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting to kind of look at. But all of those events, not bad events for you by any stretch of the imagination. Do you know what I mean, man? Like these aren't terrible events. So I'm fucking excited about it.
Yeah, it's good, pretty good set of events for me. The axle's one of my favourites. Shield carries, I really like a front carry for distance. Deadlift, we will see. I'm hoping to come on in the gym.
You'll smash it.
A fairly strong event. Stones, they've got the heavy stones in this year too. Stones up to 200 kilos, which suits me because I don't seem to be the quickest with the lighter run. I don't know if it's a height thing or what, but with a heavier run, it can kind of rely a bit more on strength, and that suits me quite well. The sandbag is the interesting one because I've never done it at this level. Now, when I've done throwing 3 years ago, I was really bad at it. Then when I've done it at them like the more regional comps, I've done a lot better. But obviously, it's such a high level. I think it's similar for everyone. It's not an event that we've seen massively at the top level.
No.
So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. It's one they can mess up a lot, so there could be some upsets. And it is it's a technical event, so it's about getting a clean run.
But that also suits you. That suits you. Do you know what I mean? Like, I look at some of these other names and I'm like, okay, yeah, strong, fucking strong, but from a technical standpoint, and being very, very pernickety about the little things, I still think you're pretty high up there, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think sandbags is an event where you can really express your athleticism. And I think we've seen, like, sandbags and kegs, we've seen it in pretty much all of the past kind of 3-4 years worth of World's Strongest Man. That, you get guys like Thor and Brian and whatever come in and everyone goes, oh, wow, that was absolutely incredible. And then you get guys like fucking Alexi come along and absolutely trounce them and they're half of the height. And it's like, yeah, but just look how fast they're moving in between every single implement. Look at how many seconds they're shaving off of every single thing. And that's just because they have that athleticism. So, when I saw the sandbag over bar, I was like, oh, okay. This could separate the pack quite a bit here, I feel like, especially coming into the stones, which, always likes to put a little bit of pressure on to finish the show.
Yeah, of course. It'd be interesting too. It's a fourth event. Obviously, an explosive event. It's a pretty quick paced show now, Giants Live, so it'd be interesting to see how guys are.
That fitness comes into it big time.
Yeah, normally have something that's not too explosive on that, so getting that explosive power under fatigue will be an interesting one, especially under pressure, because if you're doing well, you're going to want to make sure everything goes right. So it'll be a great one to watch. It'll be a great one for the fans, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. I will be watching with bated breath, 1000%. Now, before we wrap this up, I like to end the podcast the exact same with everyone, so I'm very interested to kind of hear what you have to say with this. So for a split second, I want you to imagine that you are stepping into a time machine. When you step into this time machine, you get to go back to when you're kind of 10, 11, 12, 13 years of age, very, very formative years of your life. In this time, you get to spend a few minutes with your younger self, obviously knowing everything that young man is about to go through to kind of end up where you are today. In those few moments, what information, wisdom, knowledge, what mantra would you give them to live by? What advice and help would you give to your younger self to allow them to navigate through all the shit that that they've got coming down the line to help you get to where you are today?
That is a good question. That is deeper than I expected. That's not what we have on a desert island, is it?
No.
What do I say? I'd probably say try and be more confident, put yourself out there more, especially for opportunity-wise in sport. You've got to push yourself and kind of be your own biggest fan, and that's something I wasn't great at for a while, especially when I was really young. So be more confident, put yourself out there more, and then also probably take the easy wins sometimes, because sometimes I haven't done comps because I thought the challenge wasn't high enough, when really it would have been, regardless of whatever I thought, it would have been a good thing to enter. So don't be scared to take a few easy wins if they present themselves. You don't always have to make it too hard for yourself, and put yourself out there more.
Hey, perfect. I don't think we've had those as answers yet, so that's very refreshing, man. I like that a lot. Man, listen, thank you so much for doing this today. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. It's been so interesting watching you come up through the ranks over the last few years. I've had the pleasure of seeing you compete in person before. You're an absolutely amazing athlete. I honestly wish you all the best for the future. I wish you all the best for this coming weekend. I really do hope you absolutely smash it and you really, you know, start to cement your name in this strongman world, because I think you have the potential, you know, to 100% be at that world's strongest man status and actually be competitive on that stage. So all the best to you, man. Thank you so much for doing this. We'll have to do it again at some point, but really appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It's been good to talk.